Can you hear me?
Yeah, science, it works.
Amazing.
Amazing. How good to see you, man.
Yeah, I keep forgetting you're in Mexico.
Yeah, you can tell as soon as you look at the room, can't you?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's my mother-in-law as well. My parents-in-law's house. It's suitably sort of fits with Mexico, definitely. I like how
Yeah.
white and zen your house is. I imagined it would be.
It's very but I'm in Nantucket. You probably don't know what that is, but
I've heard the limerick before. If that
yeah,
makes
exactly. But it's actually I looked it up when I was here, and it's the wealthiest bit of real estate in the United States.
Of course it is. The last time I spoke to you when you were in England, you were staying with a member of Sepultura who was friends with Brian Eno.
Oh yeah.
You just move in these kind of circles, so yeah, I was expecting.
But that's a funny thing about the way we live is then it's like, oh, do I have enough money in my bank account to take the fucking ferry back? You know what I mean? To get to my car?
I was just thinking this today. I was having one conversation about this this not-for-profit organisation and all of these funding things I was putting up, and at the same time I was talking to Adriana saying, yeah, we're probably going to have to go supermarket shopping now before the money runs out of the account. You know,
exactly.
It's an interesting thing. I guess I'm going to have to be official radio because I'm already recording you, so we should probably do introductions and everything. Just
yeah, I was going to say, I know from experience the problem is when you know somebody doing this stuff is you have to start right away, or we're going to talk about all this stuff that then we're like, oh, why didn't?
Oh, by the way, this is Juan Maclean. Yeah, exactly.
All right, I'm going to hit record on my other thing.
Perfect. Well, I'm already recording you.
All right, I'm all good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess I need to intro you first of all. So I'm speaking with who I'd like to call my good friend Juan Maclean, famous DJ, music producer. I am checking notes, by the way, just because I'm trying to be professional here. Affiliate with DFA Records, former pop star on Sub Pop with the band Six Finger Satellite, former Bostonite transplanted to New York in the state of New York. Is that about right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say. I would say my time on Sub Pop was more post-punk star than pop star.
Well, that's right. I mean, I just, you know, as a 14-year-old at the time, I hate to say it, so that to me was, I think being a pop star was anybody who you'd heard of, basically. So post-punk and everything just all kind of, you know, I would have regarded Kurt Cobain as a pop star, for instance. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of the term I would use. But to explain the show that you're on, and mainly to explain it to anybody who's listening, it's really weird having a conversation with the thought that other people are listening. I don't know about you. I'm used to having people interview me and being like, oh yeah, hi. But now that I'm the person who has to be conscious of this, it's really strange. So the show that you're appearing on is on a new Newcastle, or should I say Northeast-based station called Slacks FM. It started about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And for my show, what I'm running is a user-generated program that's generated by the Us and Them Outsider Dancing group on Facebook, which you're a member of. Basically, all I'm doing is continuing the theme of my career, which is getting credit for music from other people. So basically, I'm just making the entire show up from the submissions that I've found on there, and then adding things such as yourself, group members, and anybody with any interesting history that fits with this concept that we've all got into music from a point of view of being an outsider at some point, and that there's a concurrent theme between what I guess you could call as the mainstream, and you could also call the outsider experience. And I'm hoping that we're going to have a chat about your own personal outsider experience of music. Or I could be proven wrong, and you could say, no, that's definitely not the way that things have been going. So I guess we'll kind of find into that. So what I'd like to kind of talk to you about is, I guess, formative experiences. And when you mentioned Sub Pop being sort of a post-punk kind of entry thing, was that the point where, you know, I mean, do you regard that as being sort of your entry into music, or was it prior to that? How did you first start sort of going to shows or finding, I guess, your tribe in music? How did that all start out?
Well, in my pretty early teens, maybe when I was like 13, 14, which now I'm going to date myself if people want to do the math. You know, this is like mid 80s or something,
Yeah.
early 80s even. I don't know. You know, I had a cousin in Boston who was a recording engineer, had a recording studio, and he'd always give me all these records. And at some point, you know, I don't know, he was kind of my entree into punk rock, basically. And that was the thing for me, getting really into like hardcore, American like hardcore,
Like
kind of
Bad
like
Brains, sort of Black Flag.
yeah, that's exactly right. Like Bad Brains, Black Flag, Minor Threat, and then all these. I mean, there were just loads of them. It's kind of like how it is in dance music now. Like everyone was, you know, in a hardcore band at some point. That was, and it was such a. To speak to your earlier point, it was a true countercultural movement, like a real one. Like, and you were a member of a tribe. There was a uniform, and it was very much in opposition to the what I'll just call mainstream, whatever culture. And I don't know, it was really exciting as a kid. You know, the music was a little idiotic. I still have a real fondness for it. But that's when I started going to shows. They'd have these hardcore matinee shows, like on Sunday, you know, in the afternoon at the club, there'd be these hardcore shows, and it would just be filled with kids, mainly dudes, like, you know, fighting and slam dancing and all that stuff.
I mean, sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, I really think that now that I'm saying this, that like the being able to go to shows, like the live part, the social part of it, is what kickstarted everything for me.
Yeah.
Because when you're like, you know, you're that age and you're getting into this weird music, and you're really, you can be pretty isolated and feel like a real like weirdo, and you're like, where's my place? And then you find these people at a show, and it's like this group of kind of fucked up people, but that solidifies this experience of like, we're in this thing.
It's an interesting thing, and I'm kind of jumping the gun because I didn't want to really get towards comparing it to what it is today, but you've just kind of nailed that straight away there, that this idea of being in a group that stood outside for things, feeling a bit different and going, Jesus Christ, there's other people who feel that way, is completely in opposition to how I think things are going at the moment. And as much as that I think most people's introduction to what people are calling a counterculture at the moment tends to actually be online, which means that you're not meeting weirdos. That just means that you're meeting sort of people through social media. And the thing that they think is outsider is because it's all powered by social media that requires likes or love hearts or things putting on that, it's actually done for acceptance rather than done to say screw you. So it's like, hi, I'm a punk, and I'm going to post up a photo of a punk, and I want 1 million likes of my photos of punk, which is the opposite of kind of saying, hi, I don't need your validation. I'm going to go into this dark room and find other people. And I guess that's kind of the key of the outsider experience that we're talking. What does interest me is how, you know, so you went from that to forming a band just to be a participant in it, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like when I was graduating from high school, you know, I got some bit of money, like, you know, you'd have a graduation party and your relatives show up, they hand you a card that has some money in it.
And you didn't buy a Volkswagen instead? Yes.
No, I was going to buy a motorcycle from my neighbor, because he had a construction company and I worked for him, like doing construction. And I knew he had this bike, and I went over there and I had the money. He's like, I'm going to save his bike. And when it came down to it, he didn't have like what we call the title here. I don't know what you guys call it.
Yeah, the pink slip.
Basically, like, I realized someone owed him money and he went and took their bike. And even at that age, I was like, this isn't going to fly. Like, you know, I can't do this. And then instead, I think I went straight to the music store and bought a guitar. And I was like, I just want to be in a band. Like, I can't really, you know.
Could you play at all?
When I was a kid, I had some acoustic guitar lessons, because it was in the 70s, and it was really, what was really big, you know, and I grew up Irish Catholic, all that stuff in Boston. And we would play acoustic guitar in the church. and
Right.
sing all those songs like Michael Row Your Boat Ashore and
Yeah,
Kumbaya
yeah,
and all that stuff.
Kumbaya, exactly. Yeah.
That's how I learned how to play guitar. So I could play it a bit. And then, but I was like, you know what? I want to be in a fucking band. That's what I want to do. And it never, and this is kind of like how I've operated since. It's like, I started with, here's the thing I love. I want to do it. And kind of blindly being like, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah, man.
Like, fuck it. It's a little bit naive, and it's also fueled like most of my musical endeavors until now. And that's what I did. I bought a guitar. I went to college and, you know, hooked up with the other weirdos there. And these other dudes, I was just like, do you want to make a band? And they also were like, we can barely play anything. And it didn't matter. We just get together and play every day.
So I guess that post-punk thing was a bit of a response to just being the second wave, really, wasn't it? It's like we all want to be in a band. We've all been energized by being part of the scene, but we don't want to sound identical to what came before us. So how can we do it different?
Well, I think post-punk was a reaction to, like, if you were a mildly sophisticated person, mildly intelligent person, very quickly you're like, you can only play, like, it's like the volume playing fast war. It's like you can only play so fast and so loud, and you just hit this wall. There's nowhere to go. It's just not interesting anymore.
Totally.
And that's what I think post-punk was like, that kind of like coming out of punk rock and people having like different influences in music and using those. And for us, it was like disco. Disco is a big one.
Well, where was your disco sort of influence come through? Was that just what was in the charts, or did you have a bit of a deeper thing with that? Or?
No, it wasn't very deep, because also bear in mind, this is like not long after, you know, disco had just kind of plummeted.
Yeah, cool.
So it was kind of like, you know, just your standard disco stuff we got super into, and incorporating, like, it really was like disco and Kraftwerk.
Right, yeah.
You know, it was like having like disco drum beats, which it's hard for people to understand now how strange that was back then. But it was. Or us even having like a synth, like I also played a synthesizer with that kind of music, and and admittedly those two elements, like the disco part and the synth part, were like us knowing that it would get a reaction from people. You know, like our singer dressing up in like leather chaps with like a red fringe leather jacket, and like a lot of stuff just to be provocative.
Yeah, exactly. It's not necessary, because I think people miss there's a big difference between novelty and provocative, and I think certain times people think one's being one thing when it's being the other. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And novelty's to get a confident and sort of, I guess, a cheap laugh. Whereas I think provocative stuff's just to give people a fright and make them think instead. And it's interesting because, I mean, the things that you're talking about, I guess to anybody sort of post-internet, the thought of, well, combining this, and this doesn't seem that crazy. And also the fact that obviously
not now.
You weren't the only people in the world doing it at the time, but the difference was you weren't connected with those other people. It happened in the pocket where you were completely unaware of each other's existence, and that's
totally unaware. And you would like, I mean, we would tour endlessly. So then you'd roll into town, and the way, you know, people would their ways of knowing about you were very limited. It was like you could buy a record, and then you could maybe read something in like a fanzine. But when you walked into the room, you know, to see a show, it's like you didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, totally.
And we were like, let's take advantage of that not knowing. And you know,
right.
But now you're right. It's like, and it was this very kind of, I would say, juvenile. It was like being in a gang. It was like, how can we like sort of terrorize an audience on a day-to-day basis? And in this way that's like, again, coming from hardcore, it was like, well, you could go in and just play like fast and loud and be scary or whatever. And that's interesting for like a few minutes.
Everybody's been scared by that already. There's nothing left to do on that. Do you know what I mean?
There's nothing left. There's nowhere left to go. Or you can like, you know, get in there and like, you know, push up against people in these ways that, you know, the people with that would be unexpected. And also, I should say, like, I'm realizing now after the fact how much there was really no container in that scene for if you were gay in that scene. Surprisingly, it was pretty hidden.
Right.
It's a weird thing to think back on now, but even just being like on tour in the United States or something is, and like, you know, someone getting out of the van in like leather pants and like a black mesh tank top with sunglasses, which was our bass player's uniform, you know, and we're like, man, can you just give it a rest when we're in Ohio or something? You know, you pull over at these truck stops. It's like the rest of us kind of like forming like a phalanx, like, because, you know, because like violence hung in the air. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I think that's kind of my point, is like back then you could do these things and they were provocative in a very real way of like violence was always hanging in the air. And now I feel like, how do you provoke anybody? Like they've seen everything. Like by the time you're 12, you've seen everything online that a human being can do.
Exactly. No, it's really true. I remember being, I think I was 21 and it was really early internet, and somebody had stuck on, and it was like low bit rate download, sort of dial-up type or whatever else. And somebody put on one of those faces of death things that was a
I remember that.
It was such a big deal that, you know, like
big deal.
And I had it enough within 2 seconds. I was traumatized from it.
Yeah,
at 21, I was traumatized by that. And I defy any kid. I mean, I would never let my daughter watch it, but my daughter's only 11. I think even she would shrug it off at this stage, because I think we've been so desensitized, and this is only 20 years. Do you know what I mean? I mean, if you go before that, there's something else. It's interesting when you talk about, because there's so many parallels between that hardcore scene and the sort of house scene as a sort of protest movement or whatever else. But there's also so many sort of diametric opposites as well. And I think I'm kind of reaching a little bit here, but I think what could be interesting is a lot of people who came from that hardcore scene, especially in America, are meeting the house scene now. For instance, Simonetti, massively into that, you know what I mean? Mike Simonetti, big thing about that. DJ Tennisman, Freddie from Italy was much into that side of things. Some of my best friends all came from that as well. And I think there's kind of there's similar aims, but it was achieved with a different thing. So I think if you were coming from the hardcore thing and suddenly you ended up in this world that was all about sort of peace, love, release, and unity, I think that could have been quite a powerful thing for a lot of people coming from one and then suddenly discovering the other. And discovering ecstasy as well. I'm not going to.
I was going to say, as you were saying that, I was like, let's not forget about ecstasy.
That peace and love thing was assisted a little bit there. Do you know what I mean? You weren't getting all hooligans hugging each other and sort of, you know, taking their tops off just because they'd seen the light, you know. But that's what I wanted to ask is, how did you kind of find yourself going from this world of being a successful proponent within a hardcore scene and being part of that whole touring thing and having some successful and very well sort of fondly remembered records, to suddenly finding yourself in clubbing experiences and being somebody who's involved in house music or dance music or electronic music, or that sort of parallel but different world?
Well, for one thing, like a club as a space, that's where I grew up. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like probably the time I was like 13, I was in them every week.
Yeah.
Same. When I at some point there was this club where you know, they would have a dance night during the week, and this is all like totally new to me. Like I don't know what goes on. They had a DJ, but the DJ would play like you know, just everything, like a reggae track and then like a techno track, like in the 80s and whatever. Like it just
Keith Twitch.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, without the sort of like
knowingness,
programming mastery, like but I didn't think of that. You're right. And then playing in Six Finger Satellite, it was like, you know, it's a post-punk band with like these with a lot of electronics, like a dance music, like foundation to it. And then so then, when I quit Six Finger Satellite, I was like, I never want to have anything to do with music again. And I mean, to the extent of like, I was like, I don't even want to listen to music ever again. Like, truly, I was like, I'm done with music. Like, I was so burnt out. And then, and this is in the late 90s. And then got into, James Murphy and Tim Goldsworthy hooked me up with a early version of Logic.
Right.
It wasn't even called Logic then.
How did you meet those guys, by the way? Just from the hardcore scene?
Yeah, I mean, James was. I had met James like in the late '80s.
Right.
So we were friends, and then pretty early on in Six Finger Satellite, he became like a fifth member of the band because he would do our live sound.
Like
Yeah, pretty much. Like he would do live sound, but he'd have like in the at the desk at gigs, he would have he had a 606 drum machine, I think, coupled with not a 303, with a 202. So he had a 606, a 202, and he would just in between bands and stuff, he would just, before we played, he'd do this whole like kind of set with like a 606 and a 202 and a tape delay, all these delays and stuff. And then when we were playing, he would play stuff back there, and like totally like another member of the band. So when I was like, I'm bowing out of music altogether, like I just want to like live in the woods, and be done. I guess he was like, you can't do that. Like it's too much of a waste of who you are or something. And they kind of like surreptitiously set me up with this little music production station at home. I had the first iMac. Remember those bubble ones?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I had an Akai S1000 sampler, a Juno 106 keyboard, and a Waldorf Micro Q synth, and some like really shitty outboard effects or something. But that's how I made all of my first bits of music.
And this is the stuff, the DFA, the early records on there.
Yeah, yep. And but as an engineer, I had my first studio when I was like 21, 22 years old. I was so kind of like entranced and taken in with this way of like producing music on a computer.
Yeah.
Like, by myself. I didn't have to do. I didn't need I didn't need to be in a band or anything.
I think the by myself thing is such a big part of it as well. I mean, vastly less successful than you did. I was in a band pretty much directly before starting getting into electronic music and making it. And the major thing for me was that I don't have to care about anybody else's opinion all of a sudden.
Yeah. Exactly.
If I want something, I can invite somebody and say, do something beautiful and I'll use it. Not, how do you think your beautiful thing complements mine, and how do we have to work around it, and how do I have to compromise for you? Do you know what I mean? And
yeah.
I think especially after the experience you had, you can see why that would be quite a welcome thing to just like, get in. I don't have to deal with any other motherfucker ever again. That's perfect.
Yeah. I mean, and when you're that age, like when you're in your 20s and, you have like these 4 people trying to be in a band together, and you're like on the road all the time, like stuffed into a van. And like most of us did not have the skills to negotiate these like interpersonal things.
Yeah.
And my way of like dealing with it at some point was just to quit, because I didn't know what else to do. I was like, I just can't do this anymore.
Were you living in New York by then, or did
I was in Providence.
Right. Which is in Massachusetts as well, or not?
Or Rhode Island.
Rhode Island, right, got you.
Like an hour and a half south of Boston.
Right, got you.
And it's a big, there's a lot of good music stuff going on there. When I was there, it was great. It was a great place it was one of those places where you could live, like, I don't think I ever paid more than $200 a month for my rent. Wow. So you could very cheaply live there and just be an artist.
What pulled you to New York then? Similar sort of.
I mean, it's New York, DFA, like James was there and all that stuff. I mean, really probably DFA and that whole thing kicking off.
Because I mean, that exploded. I can only guess, and I'm going to ask you about it, but you know, it must be such a strange. We've all been involved with things that started off small and got bigger and were really fun. But I don't think I've ever truly been involved in something that ever truly could have said became a phenomenon. And I think the DFA thing, quite legitimately, you could say you were part of what was for a long time, for a frozen moment in time, a very specific phenomenon. Did you feel like that at the time? And looking back, does that seem fair? And were you aware of it while it was happening?
No, I like personally, I had no idea at the time. And the thing is, it really, I think the reason that the way that you can end up being a part of something like that is like, we just didn't give a fuck about anything. Like, it was like, when we were making those first records, it was like truly just did not care about pleasing anybody. It was like, we're just going to do this thing. Fuck everybody else. Like, who cares? Like, I mean, people were making fun of us. Like, my first 12-inch on DFA, I played it for my friend who worked at this record store in New York called Other Music, which was like the big, like, cool music store, elite music store, you know, go and buy music, whatever. And he was like, he basically said, he's like, look, I know you think you're making this like great music, but I have to tell you, basically, like, it's really dumb, and people are gonna laugh at you if you try to put this out, because like it's just kind of dumb and like.
By the time I Get to Venus, was it? Or,
yeah.
I mean, I love that record, but it does. It kind of stands in this. But I guess it's where you come from as well, because it's very easy to be like look at things through the retrospectoscope. But I listen to that and I hear elements of like Yellow Magic Orchestra.
Yeah, that was where I was coming from.
Yeah, but if you're not aware of that and you're not aware of the pedigree that it comes from, it's really fucking stupid. Do you know what I mean?
It's dumb. That's kind of that was, and that also was kind of the point, because things were like progressive house was pretty big, and like
DFA brought me back into dance music. I dropped out of dance music completely from the late 90s up till about 2004, 2005. About 2005, because I was a year late on DFA for it to have reached as far across to us to really get into it. And again, we were most familiar with it to start with from like House of Jealous Lovers and things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I mean, that was the narrative. Yeah. That was the story, because all of us were like, you know, like, this music all kind of sucks. Like, and it's not fun, and it's not, I don't know, like it felt very formulaic and all these other things. And also like going to clubs, like in New York, it was always like these kind of dress up kind of places.
It was the Super Club, wasn't it? It was like, I mean, I can remember Cream London being Cream Liverpool being very representative of the direction the clubs had gone in. Not to particularly disparage that one club, but I always remember there'd be this money. There was all of this whole, very like what it's got to today, to be honest. And this is why I'm finding myself moving back into other type of music. This whole element of it not being a club or a party, but it being an event. Do you know what I mean? You come to an event and the bottle servicey type of, and you know, wear shoes and dress to impress, and it's like, this is everything that you got into it to get away from. This was meant to be the opposite of that, you know.
But even like that to me is an easy target, and I actually have more sort of compassion for those people that might get dressed up and go to those clubs. What I find particularly egregious, what's happened is kind of like the superstar DJ world of our world, where like people aren't dressing up, but there is, let's be honest, a uniform.
Although this is what I'm referring to now, it's hidden in plain sight. So that, I mean, if you take this trajectory, and I think we're both trying to get into slagging things off. And so, okay, we've got your history out the way. Let's say what's terrible. But this whole thing of sort of EDM came, and we all laughed at it 10 years ago. All we did is we looked at it and waited for the money to come through to this side, and now everything's modeling itself on the same thing, which is, you know, a cult of personality behind a DJ and a whole sort of 360 branded experience who you're into as a DJ, and this fake version of an underground that you're signing off into to make you feel as though you're doing something different when you're doing absolutely nothing different to what was happening in the early noughties. The only thing is at least they admitted that they were a corporation. Do you know what I mean? It's
I just don't think, I don't know if anyone engaging in that world though really thinks that they're doing anything like countercultural or underground or something. I don't think they do. To me, it's just like, well, those spaces and this music was the place where, like, for whatever reason, who we were, it could go, and there'd be other weirdos and other those kinds of people, and we'd get together and have that community. And now it's like the popular kids in high school have taken over, and I can't compete with them. Like, I'm not good looking enough for endless Instagram posts. I'm not, I'm not young enough. I'm not, like, whatever. But my thing is kind of like, all right, so there's this now new scene that looks kind of like what I do.
Yeah.
All I can do is put my head down and just do what I do. And there are, like, all these amazing people all over the world that we have this community, but it's like a small hidden one underneath this other one.
It's confused because, I mean, the interesting one is when you talk about the hardcore thing from the start, and you mentioned somebody like Fugazi. I never know if I'm pronouncing it. Is it Fugazi or Fugazi? How do you?
Fugazi, yeah.
So the Ian MacKaye thing about creating your own system within the system. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
The system kind of out there. For a lot of years, for us, I think we didn't need to do something like that because the music sounded very different. Do you know what I mean? Commercially viable and popular attracted a mainstream of people, and the type of things we did only really had the opportunity to be played out in the little weirdo clubs, so we naturally found each other. Do you know, I'm into this music, I'm only allowed to play it in these places, and it becomes a taste filter, and only those type of people come in. But like anything, it's been usurped and sort of culturally not appropriated. I hate that term, but it's been mainstreamed, and what makes it confusing is the music that's really popular and really big sounds very much like the music that you and I are into.
Oh, totally, yeah.
The same. It's not the same thing, but it's very easy for somebody on the outside to think, well, this and this is the same thing. You're just less successful at this big thing. And it's trying to get across the thought to each other that, like, we're not swimming in that lane. We're not taking part in that. What we do is very similar. As an outsider, you might be able to say that this is a smaller version of that, but it's not, because it comes from a completely different sort of moral, ethical, and not even as deep as that, just a different way of enjoying things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fabric announced yesterday that they're going to ban phones on their dance floor.
Yeah, good for them.
And the whole of sort of social media in the UK is going wild about it, saying, but this is how we remember our memories, and we like the ID tunes and etc. And it's like, go and do it somewhere else. Just these people do that. I don't want to play at a club where I'm being filmed ever again.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's like, that's fine. That's my point, is like, you know what? If people want to do that, then have your clubs where everyone's taking pictures. Fair enough. To me, there are just a few things that are really important to what I want to do. And one is, like, when you mentioned Fabric, is like, I like playing smaller places. Like, I don't really want to play in a place that's bigger than 450 capacity.
I hate playing big festival stages, which
probably, and in the face of,
probably cost a fortune, but it's like, what?
No, then you brush up against this thing with capitalism, where it's like, you can't get paid as much money to do that, and then you find yourself saying, like, well, am I truly going to make a stand and say, no, I'm not going to do that thing because it's too many people.
Yeah,
that's one thing. And then like, a place having good sound is another thing. And then the third thing is, and the most important thing, is people.
It has to,
like, I have met so many people, like, doing this, that people I love so much, that are, like, all over the world, you know, and, like, and you go and I love, like, those, and you make new friends and these little groups of people, and it's all about, like, this music, and it's about dancing in a dark room and having these times together. That's what's important to me.
Well, this is what shows you the two parallel industries, if you think about it, because at some point, I think obviously it happened to you a lot earlier and you recognized it before me, but on the trajectory, for instance, that I've been on, it started off with friends and people who were into what I was doing would book me to come to their country, their city, and you'd get to meet everybody behind the night, and you'd stay there for a few days, and you'd make friends for life. And as you feel you're getting more successful and more people are interested, or the gigs are getting bigger, if you like, what you all of a sudden find yourself doing is that you're not meeting the people who run the party. You're meeting the person who they employ to look after the people who come to play their event instead.
Yeah.
I mean, and the sort of in quotations, bigger it gets, the more distanced you get pulled from it. And you actually end up feeling like you're being more successful in that, but you're being successful in something that you didn't get into it in the first place. I got into it to meet people.
And it's depressing.
It really is. And then you find, I mean, even as a label owner now, I'm finding more and more the people who I'm releasing, I'm not even having a conversation with some of them because they're through 3 layers of management, because they're swept up by that. I mean, even I have we both have managers that we work with, but I think we use them for very different reasons, which is because I don't like, doing certain elements of the job, and they're much better than me at it, you know what I mean? And it's nice to have a friend and confidant to talk about. But this whole insulation by route of management is fine if your bookings are being talked about in the terms of it being a kind of business merger. Our brand is going to merge with your brand to do a collaborative event, and that's what your gig ends up becoming. Do you know what I mean? Like using your pulling power against our reach and whatever else. And it's like, I'd happily take less money to become less well known, to play at clubs that book me because of the music I play, not because they think I will or won't fill the club. And I'd happily set up a club where, as the club owner, I fill it with people who want to come because they're part of that club, and I can put on any guest that I want, regardless of whether you've heard of them. And that was the world that I used to exist in, and I think that was the way it was over a decade ago for a big sort of subculture of it. And the bleed has made these two things seem indistinguishable, but they really do need to become 2 completely separate channels.
I mean, then you're just getting into the world of what are we going to do about capitalism? Because let's face it, as a DJ, what you're doing is you're being propped up to get bodies into a space to sell them alcohol. Like we're alcohol salesmen on the economic level.
Yeah, if you subscribe to that world, I agree, definitely. But again, coming back to the Fugazi thing, you can set up your own system that can run independently of that. Do you know what I mean? And
sure.
I think there are
what does that look like? If, like, say, for example, if you're not going to even sell alcohol, then what does that start looking like?
Well, I mean, if you're not going to sell alcohol, let's face it, then let's look at what's equitable. Do you know what I mean? If you're not going to sell alcohol, then your concerns are a space and a PA system. That's it. Right? And if you take it from the point of view that the DJ, and I mean, I'm not suggesting this for a second, but just seeing this thought all the way through, then you come down to, you've got the performer, the equipment to provide that performance, and the space to do it in. So the way to do it is like, what does that cost for the sound and the space? Let's say you could get it all done within £500. Do you know what I mean? That's a very low-ball thing, but I'm sure there's a way that you can do that in space for 200 people. So then you're splitting £500 between 200 people, aren't you?
Yeah, it's not a lot.
It's fucking doable, isn't it? And you just bring your own alcohol. If you just really want to do it for the love of having a party. Do you know what I mean?
One of my best friends owns one of the best clubs in Brooklyn, maybe the best. I won't say who it is.
Well, I know who it is, and I love it.
You can fill in the blanks. But we were talking about this because I was like, man, my dream is like a club where alcohol is not sold, but disregarding the legality, like psychedelics are. Like if you could sell ecstasy and mushrooms or something. And I was like, but you obviously can't have a club without alcohol. And he was like, hold on a second. I've done the math. And he's like, this is how much, he knew exactly how much, this is how much when people come to our club, on average, they spend on alcohol. And he's like, all this equation means is simply charging people a little bit more for a ticket price. Mm-hmm. And he's like, and then you can he was talking about like, set up a space that's like a refrigerator where people can just store their like bits of alcohol that they bring or something. Yeah. And he's like, problem solved. And it really was not that big of a deal.
When I went to university, which wasn't I mean, it was in the last decade and I only went for a year, but I had to go to college before I went to university to get the suitable grades because I left school too early. So about 9 years ago was when I was at college. And for the last sort of big assignment, we had to come up with a study that we needed to put in. And so I did my study on the criminal justice bill, which was for anybody, because I remember we're doing a radio station. So anybody who's listening, that was when the government banned dance music basically being played outdoors. They put a thing in where they said that
I know about it.
No more people couldn't gather to listen to repetitive. Right. And the reason they did it, and I did the research on this, the reason they did this was because alcohol sales dropped 11%.
I just saw a documentary about this.
Right, got you. Well, tell me what it is, because I wouldn't mind seeing it. So alcohol sales dropped 11%, which was a massive dent on the economy of taxable items, on top of which there was an alcohol lobbying movement that definitely was never a sort of ecstasy lobbying movement or whatever else. So yeah, they were worried about the social effects or whatever else, but they were more worried about the economic effects for the mainstream of a counterculture not taking part in it. At the same time, the cost of alcohol on our National Health Service was ridiculously inflated. Like the actual benefits of alcohol sales dropping 11%, the saving on the health benefits of the, I mean, you could still argue that obviously the other things that people were doing weren't tested, and sort of you don't know what the impact of those would be. But it's not like people stopped doing those things just because they banned them doing them in fields. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
A bit of a fatuous argument, that. But yeah, the benefits of getting rid of alcohol far outweighed keeping going with alcohol. Now, don't get me wrong, I like drinking, so I'm not advocating it. But but what I am saying is, if people use that as being the sort of the major driver in this type of thing, I do not think that's true. I think, if anything, the only thing that alcohol really drives is social interaction for uncomfortable people.
It is good for that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. No, I mean,
yeah, but when you look at where I'm coming from is like, when you look at what happens in a club, and it's like a DJ playing music in the dark and people dancing. There's a whole scene of stuff that I kind of actively definitely avoid as a dancer showing up to a club, which is what I call like woohoo party time kind of stuff, which honestly, and I'm not even talking about like dumb house music, like party music, any space where it's like alcohol is dominant and there's a kind of like university student feel to it or something, and it fits into this narrative of how we're supposed to live. That's like, okay, in your 20s to up to your mid 20s, this is when you go out and you party and you hear music and you dance or whatever. Then you get a real job and you're done. And if instead you had spaces where people were taking like ecstasy, mushrooms, LSD, like even marijuana, getting together with other people, dancing, and there's a different kind of music suited for that world too. Mm-hmm. What happens to those social structures then? Because alcohol is a very numbing, as much as it makes like immediate intimacy easier, it is a numbing agent, and it is hard on your body. And these other things are unifying agents that, I mean, there's no better way to put it, really. I guess I'm kind of a hippie, but it's like people love each other.
No, but it's true. I mean, I saw a change, and I got back into alcohol in my early 30s. Similar to you, I'm guessing, because we've talked about this before, and I think a sort of Estonian Catholic background and a Geordie working class background, there's a lot of similarities between
definitely
the way that we grew up, and sort of alcohol was a big feature in my, sort of from being just turned a teenager all the way through until sort of my mid-20s or my early 20s, but then discovering other stimulants that had a bit more of a deeper core effect. First of all, they changed my life.
Yeah.
Completely changed my worldview, completely broke my social conditioning, and made me achieve all of the things that or take all the paths that I've taken since. And I've started drinking alcohol a lot more in the last decade, just because I was moving away from the thing about the good things about these things were not done in moderation, which they weren't done in moderation.
Yeah.
sort of everything else in your life seems to fall away to the sides,
Yeah.
and sometimes you do it. Whereas alcohol, and the reason, I guess, one of the reasons why it's so popular, along with sort of things like cocaine and things like that, the reason why they're so popular is because they're a weekend thing that most people can dip into. If somebody starts taking cocaine instead of, say, a psychedelic, they know that they're going to be high for what, 40 minutes? Do you know what I mean? It's very much sort of, a kind of American Psycho type drug where you can dip into the opposite thing, rather than the sort of like a Ken Kesey Easy Rider type thing where you drop off and sort of, go on the Great American Road Trip instead. So there's a sort of, I do think that the story of our histories, or dance music, rock music, of anything, or the social history, is the story of the prevalent stimulant at the time as well. And I'll hesitate to say drugs, because, I mean, Jesus, a lot of the sort of beatport stuff was driven by coffee. Do you know what I mean? It's it doesn't have to be an illegal drug that drives it. And I know the tastes have changed very much now. And there are a lot of different drugs again. I think, cocaine and ketamine and things like that are a lot more popular, and you can see that even that shows that there's a bit of a schism between two different scenes as well. But I just think, it gets back to your whole point about, I mean, we all want to dismantle capitalism, but I also like the fact that I'm speaking to you on a MacBook. We're all complicit in all of these big capitalist crimes, do you know? And it's sort of, how can you find a system that is separate enough but still works within, because I'm not advocating revolution. I'd love it, but I also have an 11-year-old daughter and a family to look after, and that's how they get you, isn't it?
I don't have the answer, honestly. Like, there are people much smarter than me that do, but I don't have it.
Do you find, I mean, you're, out of everybody who I know doing this, you're definitely up there on the top of the list of one of the people I know who still has the more pure joy in still being a participant of this. I know we all know a lot of people, and a lot of them enjoy dipping in and dip out, but there's still very much, you can tell it's work for them.
Yeah.
And with you can tell that it's kind of work secondary. The amount of times we played a gig together and I've lost you because you're on the dance floor. It's been, very notable. So I don't know, what's your tips to maintain that enthusiasm?
Ecstasy.
I knew you were going to say that as well. I think that's definitely it, or do you think without you'd still be able to?
I don't know, because I think what happens is, for me, it's kind of like, if I didn't enjoy the music and that part of it and going to clubs, it becomes a kind of job that I think is more depressing than not liking your job, going to work at like a bank or something, because it's a thing that you once loved and now is drudgery.
Yeah, you polluted it.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to the things we were talking about, of like, you have to consciously cultivate the environment that makes it so that you still enjoy it. And like you said, like I've had years of those things, of like getting sucked into like being on the road. My booking agent's like, oh, there's offers for here and here and here, and never going home, and doing that thing where you're playing these big clubs. And like you said, like someone who's just like hired to come pick you up, but I don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
Pick you up at the airport, you go to some hotel that's pretty nice. You're in this hotel by yourself. You don't know anyone. There's not even like that kind of promoter that's like just a massive fan and they can't wait to meet you, which can be a little annoying sometimes, but I've made so many great friends that way.
Yeah.
So now you've kind of like cut out all of the things that make it really enjoyable. And then you just end up in this place of like, it sucks, and you're doing it for money, and it gets really mercenary.
I think that's the top and bottom of it, isn't it? I say this a lot to a lot of people, is that, we're under massive pressure in a kind of, late stage capitalism sort of environment to regard success as being either fiscal, do you know what I mean? Like, those on pounds, they're success points, as though you've got like a little bar on a computer game, like Mario, where you run around collecting coins and that's your score. Like you're making as you score. And if somebody's making more money for you, or if the amount of people who are turning up to their gigs is higher than yours, or if the followers that they've got on social media is a bigger number, or the likes that they get on a post is a higher number, that they're more successful than you. That those, and they're not the metrics of success. The metric of a success, I guess, has to be something, in my opinion, that is completely intrinsic, that is sort of, how you feel.
But that's, I think, the difference between success, which you're talking about as defined by the capitalist system we live in now, versus just personal fulfillment.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you,
fulfillment's better than success, if you want to look at it that way. Yeah.
I mean,
or it's a form of success.
If you were dying of a heart attack right now, and as you're dying, you could die pretty happily if you had made pretty decisions with integrity that, you were treating people well and you were living your dream, basically. But all those other things, man, you could just get to the end of your life and you'll be like, what the fuck did I do?
Yeah.
It's totally meaningless.
Yeah. Nobody's counting their times based on sort of how good they looked on a video for other people or how much time they spent in a green room.
But they will. You might remember, I played at this place, and the promoter, came and took me out to dinner, and I met their friends, and it was great, and I was nice to them, and we all had a good time.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, as you get older, it becomes really difficult because, like you said, those metrics of success, like the size of your bank account, or how big your fees are, or any of these kinds of things. It's hard not to think of yourself as some kind of failure as a human being. I mean, I have a lot of that in me, where people would look at me and be like, what the fuck are you talking about? You still are making amazing music, you do all this great stuff, you have a lifetime of doing this. But the fact is, people my age generally at this point own 2 houses, they have a retirement account, they have all this stuff that I don't have anything.
This is the trick, though, taking that on a deeper level. It's getting upset about not having things that you don't want, I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
I still, bringing it back to the DJing thing, sort of, we've spoke a lot over, I've spoken to you more than most people over this last year of being locked down. And I think it's been quite transformative for both of us in a lot of different ways that we've touched on. But for me, a lot of it has been to do with my relationship with what I was doing versus what I want to do and what I realized I want to do. And a big one was, as we say, not getting involved in all of these, just gigs that I just aren't satisfying, things that are done for the money, things that are done to become a bigger name with people who I don't know and whose tastes I probably don't share. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the thing that I still find myself doing is I'll see a big festival that I would normally have played, that I've deliberately not put myself in the frame for in numerous different ways. And then it'll announce and my name will not be on there. And I'll be like, why haven't they booked me? And I have to sit there and go, I don't even want to play. Why am I upset that I haven't been validated by somebody asking me to do something that I don't want to do?
Yeah.
And it's a crazy thing. I think we all have this fear of being left out. It's just drilled into us and it's sort of magnified.
Yeah.
It's all to do with wrapped up in a value, a self-worth value that you create for yourself.
Yeah.
And ultimately, why would you let your own sense of self or your own self-value be based on what somebody wants for themselves? It's like, getting jealous of big DJs doing big gigs that I don't want to do. I might as well be getting jealous of whoever the biggest name is in country and western, playing to a bunch of people in Stetsons.
Yeah.
It's not the thing I want to do, so why let it bother me? And I don't know, maybe you do want to have that more security and maybe you do want all those things, but you're the type of person, I think, if it was what you'd actually craved all along, you would have got it for yourself. The only reason you don't get these things is because deep down, who cares? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't care. It's but I do, it does come off as a kind of, because it is a lack of ambition. I don't have much ambition, to be honest. I'm not a hustler. I'm not there are so many ways. I was going to say I could have capitalized on what I do more, but even now I don't do it. I just, for whatever reason, I just don't have it in me. I think it's a bit of a, I just don't. Like,
Good
I just
thing.
don't care. I don't care enough.
I think that's a useful thing to have, though. I mean, obviously, other than, like you say, your Bostonian conditioning to kind of beat yourself up over stuff, because that's something I can relate. But if you detach that from that, I think, yeah, you've said it yourself. It's been an incredibly successful career that's still going on. 30 years later, if you combine both of them.
Yeah, 30 years. Yeah. But now, like, things are opening up again, like, you know, and getting gigs. But there are people, and a lot of these people are my friends, who are like, they're not even American, they have entire US tours booked, and they're playing everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like,
that thing, we know who we're talking about in all of this, and I don't want it to be the kind of, it's a kind of, they almost don't represent an easy target, although as an easier target as any millionaire ever represents. It's like, yes, millionaires are an easy target, but they also don't really care because they're millionaires. Do you know what I mean? But there is something distinctly wrong, especially, I mean, even the American DJs who came back to America, who left to capitalize on everything that was happening in Europe at the time. And then as soon as America opens first, they completely turned their back on. And I think 3 or 4 straight away, it's just like, oh, hi guys, hi, we're back. And we're coming to take all of the gigs off all of the people who've had no support for the entirety of this kind of American experience. It's, I mean, it is what you would expect people to do. It's just a bit of an awful reminder of how shitty and self-serving this thing that was built up about, you know, peace, love, unity, and respect. They're proving that they're very much in that channel rather than this channel, and being in this sort of equitable channel is usually what drives their shtick, if you get what I mean. It's like, oh yeah, they're all right on and whatever else, but until they can go and make whatever money they are, for certain.
Well, that's the like right now what we're going through, like in New York, because, you know, it's actually, I know the players involved, like one of Justin Carter, who owns Nowadays, is one of my best friends. Josh, who books Good Room, which is my home base, is one of my best friends. And so the conversation is about, like, when are we going to start booking these international people again? And I know that both of them, like, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to betray their confidences, but say at Good Room, Josh and I, like, Josh worked for no money for 1.5 years, like doing live streams, begging for people for donations just to keep the fucking lights on, literally, at the club. I did all these live streams, you know, for free. We just put so much work into, like, saving this place, and now, like, getting bombarded with, say, like, big English act from the UK who, if Josh booked them, honestly would probably sell the place out in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's like, they don't give a fuck about Good Room.
Well, I mean, the reason they'd sell the place out in 5 minutes is because people like Josh and us and everybody have given them that power. Do you know what I mean? So all you do by rebooking them after all of this has gone by and they've shown their true colors is you're handing that power back over to them. And
but who turns down that? Like, if you're honest and you own a club and it's like, I could just book these guys, whatever. Still have my local people playing, sell out immediately, and you make a shitload of money. Like, why wouldn't you do it?
Well, no, I can't blame them at all. But I also think that personally, and again, it's from a quite idealist point of view, that, you know, that it's great saying these things where you don't have to act on them fully. I'm trying to do my own modest version of it, I guess. But if everybody rejects this, then all of a sudden that system eventually doesn't exist and you have something more equitable. But
everyone has to.
You have to reach a system where like a stage where
it has to be everybody
completely sick of it.
But that's the problem with capitalism where we are now, is like, we've lost that power because it has to be everybody. Because if it's like, oh, this huge act wants to do an underplay at Good Room and sell it out immediately, or the place down the street can book them. Like,
that's the problem. Yeah.
Why would you know, like, basically it's like, what human being will turn down money?
No, totally.
Who will? Some do, but it's a hard thing to do.
And even people who do are comfortable enough to do it. If you need things.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, but they're not the ones. It's like the rest of us who live in this constant scarcity mode of, like, if I don't get this money now, I will be existentially annihilated. And that's what's hanging over our heads. And it's a false scarcity. Yeah. Like as human beings, we have all the resources to feed, clothe, house everybody easily. No, like it's a total false scarcity. And they've terrorized us into going along with this thing. And the problem is there's no they. It's just like a general movement of where this all goes under this system.
General movement of how people naturally find themselves falling into routine. It's a club that you've joined at a certain level. And I'm sure as sort of, as righteous as you and I can get, we probably, if we ended up in that position, we'd end up falling into it because it's insidious. It's that you don't realize that you're the person doing it because you've got your problems. Like my wife needs that car I've bought her. If I don't, I'm not going to take that back off her, whatever. Do you know what I mean? Whichever it works. But what my kind of response to all of that, and it's nice that you give us the opportunity to bring it up, even though you didn't realize, I kind of realized a while back that, especially at the beginning of this pandemic, that I just think a big problem that we find ourselves doing is we end up looking at things automatically because we're all linked from the internet, etc., on a global solution scale. Do you know what I mean? Like a sort of a unified thing that happens, and we all have to be part of a giant initiative that changes this overnight, that's part of this, or a revolution or whatever else. And I'm very much more into the idea of personal, community and regional revolution instead. And what I realized is that I can't change the country that I live in. I can't even make that more equitable. But what I can do is I can make the region that I'm in, the area that I'm in, and the people I'm in, and the things that we do close by operate in a certain way, and I can drive towards that. And then, like we said before, then it's a case of finding the other people who operate within the new system that you've set up and just have something that completely removes itself from where it is. It's like you say, how do you turn down the big money gigs? Well, they're shit. That's how you turn them down.
I mean,
you tap into what's actually important to you instead.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I'm starting this company that's getting off the ground.
Yeah.
The ketamine clinic in New York, and we also do psilocybin retreats. And it's very much like we're meant to be like disruptors in this psychedelic space that already has been like taken over by like venture capitalists and that kind of thing. And so we're very much like the disruptors. We're kind of like the rebels in the psychedelic, the legal sort of psychedelic space. And already, as we just get funded, like already there's talk, like, how do I put this, of like another company that would probably want to buy us out in a few years. And what I think of is like, if I could walk away with $1 million, am I going to say no? Like just to walk away, be like, sure, take it. And the fact is, I honestly, like, I wouldn't say no. I'm already kind of dreaming of it.
What do you use the $1 million for afterwards? That's all. So if you can use that as being a facility.
I use the $1 million to hire a PR company who goes into my Instagram account and gets me many more thousands of followers than I have, so that people think I'm much bigger than I am, which then gets me higher paying DJ gigs because promoters think I'm bigger than I am.
And paid promotions with, TV companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Then I hire a PR company who get me features in the music periodicals, which fans, like the consumer, thinks you're in there because you're good or better than everyone else, and that's why you're there. But I'll do all that. That's what I would spend my money on.
Constantly good and bad within a.
It actually would be a funny experiment if you were like, you know what? I'm gonna make myself as big as.
It's crazy, but I think this kind of doom and gloom is a perfect point to kind of draw things to a close. Is there anything that you want to particularly sell, to mention, to hawk?
In the spirit of how terrible of a hustler I am, you're right. I should.
What's your next release?
Well,
you're doing one a day at the moment, aren't you? It seems.
There's on Umbra International.
I love that label. That label is fantastic, and it's been a dark horse. It's snuck in from behind.
So good.
And just
you know
what they were doing, and
what they do that I love is the compilation.
It's amazing.
That's all about that.
No, not in the mess. So they're Disco Punks or something. It's called, isn't it?
The new one.
New Wave Disco Punks, I think it's called.
Yeah, I'm on that, but also I have a track coming out on a 4 or 5 track compilation. Sean Johnson's on it.
Nice.
And I have one on that, which is one of my favorite tracks I've done, I think, ever. All of it, but I'll say that about also, I have a Correspondent EP coming out.
Oh, nice. Sure. On a Correspondent, that's great.
My second one, yeah.
I mean, I think in particular with Umbra, a mutual friend of ours, Justin Strauss, a New York DJ, he said a really great quote once, which was like, just stick to what you do, and every now and again it'll become cool and people will pay attention. And then
I've always said that. You stick to what you do, and then it comes and goes, and it comes around again. But
I think Umbra are having a real, because that whole kind of EBM new wave thing is super fashionable, and everybody's jumped onto it like a bandwagon, and they're like, sorry, check out our pedigree. We're the first, and it really shows. Yeah.
But I'll tell you, on both of those EPs, on that and my Correspondent EP, I've done the classic shooting myself in the foot, where I've made these tracks that I think are phenomenal, with that have vocals actually that are
100 BPM,
around 100 BPM, except they're super heavy and heady and kind of dark, so you can't play them early in the night, really, and you can't play them late because they're too slow.
I don't know, just they're just for the right party, not every party.
That's the thing. They're for a specific party where you can play 105 BPM at 4 a.m.
My version of that is I do them for like fucking 15 minutes long with like 10 different changes in it. It's like,
right, exactly.
It's like there's probably 5 good tracks here, and I can't play all of them, and there's no obvious way to separate them.
But those are my next 2 that I'm super excited about, actually. So
that's great. I don't know. I've not been checking any promos at all, but I need to now because gigs are coming.
Yeah, gigs are coming. And
did you ever think? I just honestly, when we were sitting in the temporary flat that I was staying, talking to you on the telephone this time last year, I didn't think we'd end up having this conversation. So it's.
No, I know it's snapping back like really quick. Like I played my first gig last week, and it was like you just forget immediately that a pandemic ever happened.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Really excited.
Yeah, it's insane. It's incredible. It's so. I mean, I honestly, after all this time, I was like, this is the fucking greatest thing in the world to do.
It's a good reminder as well, because I think a lot of us we're getting jaded, and for all the complaints, it is still something that I love more than anything else in the world. My family, you know what I mean? It is the most rewarding thing that I've ever been involved in. It's been nice to have this opportunity for all of us to kind of go, I love this bit, I don't like this bit, I'll keep on doing this bit, I'll not keep on doing this bit, that's all. So it's been healthy. As healthy as a global black swan event with millions. Not meaning to minimize that bit, but I'll let you go, because I was hoping we'd be able to make it an hour, and we're almost an hour and a quarter. So some judicious editing. I'll try to cut out everybody who we said was a complete scumbag. Not joking.
Yeah, you can weep over that. So.
Yeah, exactly. And but no, cheers for your time, and it's always great to chat.